This episode of Please Explain is sponsored by Aware Super, helping you get more from your future.
From the newsrooms of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, this is Please Explain. I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris. It's Wednesday, July 26th. Some people save for years just to have one. For others, it's a reward for achieving a significant milestone. We're talking about luxury handbags, the sort from designers like Gucci, Prada, and Hermes, that at the highest end can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. But now there's a disturbing new trend, superfakes. They're counterfeit designer bags, but not like you remember. These aren't cheap knockoffs from markets. They're virtually indistinguishable from the real thing, sold as the real thing, and for big money. Today, national fashion editor Melissa Singer on the Sydney-based luxury retailer that has been accused of selling superfakes, and why for some people, a superfake is a valuable item to have. So Mel, you sort of accidentally stumbled onto this growing problem of young Australians who've been duped into buying so-called superfake designer bags. So can you walk us through what's happened, and can you tell us a bit about the young women you've met who've been duped?
Sure, Sam. Well, a couple of months ago, we ran a story from the New York Times in our Good Weekend magazine about the rise of superfakes, which are very high-quality fake handbags that are almost indiscernible from the real thing. So after I shared this New York Times story on my social media, a lot of people started contacting me saying, "Did you know that this problem was just as big in Australia?" Except unlike the New York Times story, which was talking about the active purchase of superfakes, these people believed that they had been duped into buying superfakes when they thought they were buying the real bags.
And so just to back up a bit, just with the New York Times piece, so why were people actively buying superfakes? Because my understanding is it's sort of a bit of a trend on TikTok and social media, almost bragging that you're buying a superfake, and this is overseas.
Yeah, so there used to be quite a lot of shame with carrying a counterfeit bag, or a bit of a secret shame. But I feel that this story in the New York Times was exposing this idea that perhaps Gen Z in particular, they aspire to have the lifestyle that goes with having a luxury bag, but in many cases, they don't like the capitalism or the corporate largesse that goes with a lot of these brands. And for people who aren't aware, a lot of the luxury brands are owned by two major companies. It's like a lot of industries in the world where there's kind of two superpowers and they control like 80% of the luxury bag market. And so part of it is that kind of rebellion against the capitalist giants of the luxury world. Part of it is simply cost of living. I mean, some of these bags can cost thousands, 10,000s, even hundreds of thousands of dollars in certain cases. So for some people, they want the lifestyle, whether they've seen a celebrity with it or an influencer on social media, but they can't necessarily afford the real thing. But what I guess Gen Z, which is I guess where TikTok comes into it, is doing is they're trying to subvert the idea of a fake bag carrying baggage, so to speak, or being something to be ashamed of.
Okay, so you've walked us through that really quite interesting trend overseas where people are sort of bragging about superfakes. But that's not what's happening here. Tons of people got in touch with you after you posted that story and said, well, actually, we're being sold these so-called superfakes, but we're being sold to them as if they're real. And we're not happy about it. So can you tell me about some of the women you've met?
Yeah, a lot of the women who came forward were really angry. Most of them had bought their bags from one particular company, and this company is called Cosette. They have a store in Sydney in the Rocks, which to people who are familiar with Sydney know that this is an area that is populated by luxury stores. It's heavily geared towards tourists. They also have a really big online presence. They do a lot of activity on Instagram. They've worked with a lot of the top influencers and celebrities in Australia. And so to the untrained consumer, this is a company that, for all intents and purposes, should be trusted. And what they do and what sets them apart from, say, going and buying a luxury bag from the retailer, like from the brand itself or from a store like David Jones, for instance, is that they claim that they have access to special resellers and partners in Europe who can sell them the bags directly at a discounted price to what the actual brands could. And that's where these women come into it. They allege that Cosette sold them a high-quality fake handbag but advertised it as the real thing.
Okay, so and just to be clear in terms of what's distinguishing these women who've bought these bags from Cosette to the people on TikTok who are bragging about buying super fakes. So the people on TikTok, are they knowingly buying fakes and they're like, this is a fake and I'm proud of it?
Yes, that's the biggest difference here. So on TikTok, this rise of the super fake is all done with eyes wide open. The consumer is aware. The consumer is actively seeking out sellers of super fakes who are often based in China or other markets around the world. I heard anecdotally some of the demand for the top grade super fakes actually comes from customers who could easily afford to buy the real thing, but they either choose to hold super fakes as decoys for security reasons. I even heard of some people, anecdotally of course, who hold super fakes almost as a bit of a game they play with their friends to see who can actually spot the fake bag or not. So, I mean, it's to some people it is a game, whereas in this case, these women thought they were buying the genuine article at a slightly discounted price to what they could buy it for if they were to go to the brand directly. And they claimed that they paid somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000 for these bags, thinking that they were getting a genuine Gucci, a genuine Prada, a genuine YSL bag, where in actual fact, it turns out there's a lot of reason to believe that they were sold a high-quality fake.
Okay, so you mentioned before that a lot of the people that contacted you were quite angry, and you've just mentioned the money there, and I guess that's the big thing. How much money are we talking? You've just mentioned a figure there. And I know that one woman you spoke to, Louise Cameron, she said, I thought I got the deal of the century because she had bought a Saint Laurent bag for about $2,500, I believe, and it normally sort of costs about $4,000. So how angry are these people?
They're so angry, these women. I think Louise is a really interesting case because Louise is not your typical luxury bag consumer. Louise is an average woman from the suburbs of Adelaide. She has 3 children, but she lusted after a designer bag. She researched it for years, and it wasn't until her husband had a bit of a windfall at the horses that she could afford it, and he gave her the money to go and buy it as a Mother's Day present. She wanted to obviously get most bang for her buck, so rather than buying it for $4,000 from the Saint Laurent boutique, which is what it was advertised at, she found it on Cosette's website for $2,500.
So they came back to me with their own certificate of authenticity, and they said that it's 100% authentic.
And so she thought it was the deal of the century.
I went to a third-party company who do authentications, so I eagerly awaited, and it came back that it wasn't authentic, that it was a counterfeit handbag. So needless to say, I was devastated.
One of the other case studies, Erin Kostopoulos, said to me that her $1,500 Gucci bag, it was enough of a reduction from the $2,300 recommended price that it was worth the, I wouldn't say risk because she didn't think she was taking a risk. It was worth taking that approach. But she said to me, it wasn't so cheap that it seemed illegitimate, which made me think they were getting it from some supplier. So really they've tapped into that trustworthiness sweet spot where it's at a great enough discount to be attractive, but not at a steep enough discount to raise suspicion.
Okay, so one thing that I'm dying to know, which really is at the heart of this new trend, which is just how good are these so-called super fakes? Because as you've written in your piece, it's a world away from cheap knockoffs. So just how good are they?
They're very good. I've seen some in my time and some of them are really good. They even have the little authentication card that the brand would insert into the side pocket. They have all the bearings of the real thing, and they're so good that I spoke to one person who works at a luxury brand who said they were at a party once And he was the only person in the room who could tell that, from a room of quite well-to-do people, mind you, who are quite au fait with owning these things. He was the only person in the room who could tell that the bag that a woman carrying was fake. And the reason that he could tell was he knew that the brand had never made it in that colour. But nobody else in the room could tell. And we're talking some sophisticated fashion people here.
I mean, that's incredible. And I believe you found out that there's even a sort of hierarchy of superfakes now, so that they're graded and there's even waiting lists for them. So can you take me through that?
I found this was one of the more wild things I heard in my interviews with people, speaking to a gentleman who runs a company that authenticates luxury goods, which is at the heart of what this story is about. He said that there's even a 6-month wait list, as you said, for certain types of luxury superfake. That's how big the demand is. And not only is there a 6-month wait, but there's also different grades, which, back to the point about this is not the tourist market bag. I mean, there are fake Chanel's and fake Hermes bags in those markets. And so let's say that's kind of the lowest grade of fake that you can get, right up to the ones that are almost indiscernible. And obviously the higher grade it gets, the more labour goes into it and the better materials go into them to make them less detectable. So that's how, and obviously the price increases accordingly.
We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Scott Hayward, and with me from Aware Super is Peter Hogg, Head of Advice Experiences and Enhancements. Peter, what are some of the simple yet important things people can do today to get more from their super?
Well, Scott, whether you're 25 or 55, it's worth spending a little time now to know where your hard-earned money is going. It's things like making sure all your super is in one fund. Chances are, if you have more than one fund, you're paying multiple sets of fees. Also, knowing how your super is invested, if it's right for your age, and asking that all-important question, is your fund performing well over the long term? Finally, make sure you take advantage of any help that your fund offers. Aware Super offers help and education via their website at no extra cost.
Thanks, Peter. Some small steps today can make a big difference to your retirement. With super advice and super returns, Aware Super is super helpful. For more information about Aware Super, including their PDS and CMD, visit aware.com.au.
Now, you've mentioned just before the authenticators that they're a key part of this. So can you please take us into this? Because they've risen up to meet demand, is what you've written, and their sole job is to tell a customer whether their bag is fake or not. But if there's virtually no discernible difference between the real thing and the superfakes, how do these authenticators determine if something is actually real or fake?
I think it's important to acknowledge that to us, it's hard to tell the difference. But these are people who deal with these things day in, day out. They see hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of items come across their systems and their desks, depending on whether they use predominantly AI and photographs or whether they use physical checking or, in many cases, a combination of both. So they are so adept at spotting them. But the demand for authentication, as you said, Sam, has increased because we have this booming market in secondary sales of luxury goods. So it's really challenging.
And it's actually quite sophisticated how they do what they do, in particular how they use AI. Perhaps you could take us through this, because I think they make a case for if something's inauthentic, based on the tiniest of details, whether it's to do with the depth of engraving or the width of a zip. So can you tell us how they use AI?
Yeah, like you said, some of the details are so small and almost microscopic. The number of stitches between component A and component B. And the way that AI is used, I suppose, is that over time, the systems collect samples, and from collecting samples, they form a profile of what this bag should look like. If 1,000 bags go through the system and every single one of them has 8 stitches between point A and point B, then all of a sudden, if a bag comes into the system and from scanning the bag there's 9 stitches, then it automatically raises a flag. And it doesn't necessarily mean automatically that this bag is a fake, but it raises a flag. And when it raises a flag, it looks for other flags. And I suppose the way that these authenticators work is they look at the body of evidence on each bag. So it gathers a body of evidence, and then on the basis of that evidence, it makes an assessment. On the balance of probabilities, they'll make an assessment that this item is authentic or it's likely fake.
Now, one really unexpected portion of your piece that I was really struck by was just how many sort of victims can be involved in a counterfeit bag, even a single one. Because I think people, certainly like myself, they often think of counterfeit bags as something of a victimless crime. You know, caveat emptor, if you've been duped by a deal that seemed too good to be true and ultimately it was, well, you know, maybe you deserved it, or at the very least, you were the only one got hurt. But that's not what you found. So can you walk us through this?
No, I think, look, obviously the first layer of victims are the people who claim that they bought bags from Cosette that were fakes. I think it's important to obviously say that Cosette denies that they've ever sold a fake bag. We've put all the claims to them and they deny that they've ever sold a fake. They say that the fact that they refunded money to many of these women is no acknowledgement that they've ever sold a fake or done anything wrong. However, most of these women they were not convinced, which is one of the reasons they were so keen to share their story.
And to be clear, they received notice from authenticators that their bags were not deemed to be real. Is that right?
Most, if not all. Some of them didn't go and seek their own authentication, but had enough of a gut feel, whether it was the item had a funny smell or the authentication certificate that they obtained with their bag when it was originally sent to them. When they went to scan the QR code, it went to a broken link. There were lots of reasons why some of the women raised suspicions and doubts over the bags. And in certain cases, Cosette itself offered to re-authenticate many of the bags. And in some cases, it returned a second authentic reading. But in a lot of the cases, the women just decided that it was safer and better to take the refund and, you know, be done with it. But since the story came out, I have been contacted by a lot of people who have not got their money back because the purchases date back a few years, or they've tried to take it up with the company and haven't so far had any success. So it has obviously, opened the floodgates a little bit. But yes, to your point about it being a victimless crime, I think you're right. A lot of people feel that they're not hurting anybody by buying a fake bag. But what I learnt from my interviews with both authenticators and also officials from Australian Border Force is that this is far from a victimless crime. And when you start thinking about it, it makes perfect sense. But a lot of these operatives who work in the counterfeit industry, they are part of criminal gangs, or they're supporting organised crime, or they're supporting the drug trade, or they're supporting trafficking of other things such as weapons or, God forbid, people. So I think when you start to think about the structures that exist behind the counterfeit industry, I think you can start to get a better appreciation that your so-called innocent purchase of a fake wallet at a market is actually potentially doing a lot of harm.
Melissa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Today's episode of Please Explain was produced by Julia Carr-Katzel. Our executive producer is Ruby Schwartz. Please Explain is a production of The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. If you enjoy the show and want more of our journalism, subscribe to our newspapers today. It's the best way to support what we do. Search The Age or smh.com.au/subscribe. I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris. This is Please Explain. Thanks for listening.
This episode of Please Explain was brought to you by Aware Super. With super advice and super returns, Aware Super is super helpful. For more information about Aware Super, including their PDS and TMD, visit aware.com.au.